Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was Iran's supreme leader, a position that placed him at the very pinnacle of the country's political and religious hierarchy. Revered by many and feared by others, he was a figure whose presence shaped the destiny of a nation. Holding ultimate authority over the nation's politics, military and religion, Khamenei's word was law. No major decision in Iran could be made without his approval, and his influence extended into every aspect of Iranian life. For over 3 decades, his decisions shaped Iran and influenced the entire Middle East. From guiding domestic policy to steering Iran's foreign relations, Khamenei's leadership left a lasting mark on the region's history. The supreme leader is chosen by the assembly of experts, not by popular vote, and serves for life. This unique system ensures that the position remains above the fray of everyday politics, granting the supreme leader immense stability and power. Khamenei's power extended into every corner of Iranian society. He appointed key officials, controlled the military, and guided foreign policy. His decisions affected everything from the economy to the daily lives of ordinary Iranians. As commander-in-chief, even the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps answered directly to him. His authority over the armed forces was absolute, making him one of the most powerful leaders in the region. His leadership was seen as a symbol of continuity and strength by his supporters. For many Iranians, Khamenei represented stability in a turbulent world, and his guidance was trusted in times of crisis. Khamenei's image and words were everywhere, making him both a political and spiritual figure. His speeches and writings were studied, quoted, and displayed across the country, reinforcing his presence in daily life. His sudden death leaves a massive void at the top of Iran's power structure. The loss of such a central figure has sent shockwaves through the nation, raising questions about what comes next. The nation now faces the daunting task of choosing a successor amid a period of crisis. Political uncertainty and public anxiety are at an all-time high as leaders scramble to maintain order. For many, his passing marks the end of an era. Generations have known no other supreme leader, and his absence is deeply felt across all walks of life. The world is watching closely, knowing that Iran's next steps could reshape the region. Global leaders are monitoring the situation, aware that any shift in Iran's leadership could have far-reaching consequences. The supreme leader's role is unique and central to understanding Iran's government. Unlike any other position, it combines religious authority with political power, making it the true center of Iranian decision-making. His influence reached far beyond Iran's borders, affecting millions. Khamenei's policies shaped alliances, rivalries, and conflicts throughout the Middle East and beyond. With his death, uncertainty and instability loom over the country. The future of Iran and the region now hangs in the balance as the world waits to see what will unfold. Iran stands at a crossroads, facing both internal and external challenges. The decisions made in the coming days will shape not only the nation's future, but also the fate of the wider Middle East. Everything changed in an instant. The world was caught off guard, as events unfolded with a speed and intensity few could have predicted. Joint U.S. Israeli airstrikes targeted a secret meeting of Iran's top leaders, striking deep within Iranian territory under the cover of darkness. The operation was meticulously planned, relying on precise intelligence gathered over months. Every detail was scrutinized, from satellite imagery to intercepted communications. The goal: eliminate Iran's key decision-makers in one decisive blow, crippling the country's ability to coordinate a response. The U.S. and Israel justified the strike as a necessary defense against Iran's alleged support for terrorism and pursuit of nuclear weapons, insisting that all diplomatic options had been exhausted. This was a dramatic escalation. Directly targeting a nation's leadership is almost unheard of in modern warfare, and it sent shockwaves through the international community. The attack was swift and devastating, leaving the targeted site in ruins and sending a clear message to Iran's allies and adversaries alike. The world was stunned by the scale and boldness of the operation. Governments scrambled to assess the fallout, while citizens everywhere watched in disbelief. Such a strike crossed a line, signaling a new phase in the conflict, one where old rules no longer seemed to apply. Typically, nations use sanctions or covert actions, not open military force, against rivals. This attack shattered that convention, raising fears of wider war. The decision to strike at Iran's leadership shows just how high the stakes had become and how desperate the situation now was for all sides involved. The aftermath left the region and the world bracing for what would come next. Tensions soared, and uncertainty gripped millions. Iran's leadership was decimated and the balance of power was upended overnight. The shockwaves would be felt far beyond the Middle East. The stage was set for a dangerous new chapter in Middle Eastern history, one marked by uncertainty, fear, and the looming threat of further conflict. The airstrike wiped out Iran's core leadership in a single devastating blow, sending shockwaves through the nation and the world. The scale of the attack was unprecedented, targeting the very heart of Iran's government. Supreme Leader Khamenei was killed, along with top military and political officials who had shaped Iran's policies for decades. Their sudden loss left a void at the highest levels of power. The commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's most powerful and influential military force, was among the dead, leaving the armed forces without clear direction. Ali Shamkhani, a key national security advisor and longtime strategist, also perished in the strike, further destabilizing the country's security apparatus. The attack left no survivors among the country's main decision-makers, erasing decades of institutional memory and experience in an instant. Iran was suddenly leaderless, thrown into chaos and confusion as citizens struggled to process the enormity of what had happened. State media hesitated to report the full extent of the losses, fueling rumors and uncertainty across the country. In response, an interim leadership council was quickly formed to maintain order and prevent further instability, but doubts remained about its authority. The process of selecting a new supreme leader is complex and fraught with uncertainty, involving religious, political, and military factions, all vying for influence. The loss of so much experience at once made the situation even more precarious, as the remaining officials struggled to fill the leadership vacuum. Iran's government was effectively decapitated, struggling to project stability both to its people and to the international community. The nation faced a leadership crisis just as external threats mounted, with military forces on high alert and citizens fearing what might come next. The future of Iran, and the region, hung in the balance, as the world watched to see how the country would respond to this unprecedented loss. News of Khamenei's death plunged Iran into mourning and rage. The government declared 40 days of national mourning, a traditional period of grief. Black flags and somber broadcasts filled the country. Massive crowds gathered in Tehran and other cities, mourning and demanding revenge. Chants against the U.S. and Israel echoed through the streets. The government vowed a severe response, promising that the attack would not go unanswered. Funeral processions drew millions, uniting the nation in sorrow and fury. The leadership used this moment to rally the public and prepare for retaliation. The atmosphere was tense, with anger fueling calls for action. Iran's leaders projected unity, determined to show strength despite the blow. The period of mourning became a time to consolidate support and plan the next move. The world watched as Iran's grief turned into resolve for confrontation. Iran's response was swift and dramatic. A barrage of missiles struck targets in Israel and several Gulf Arab states. Major cities like Tel Aviv, Dubai, and Manama were hit, spreading panic and chaos. Iran's message was clear. Its reach extended far beyond its borders. By targeting U.S. allies and interests, Iran aimed to widen the conflict and pressure its adversaries. The attacks caused economic shockwaves. Airports closed, oil prices soared, and markets tumbled. The strikes were both a show of force and a warning. The conflict had spilled across borders, threatening regional stability. Civilians and businesses were caught in the crossfire. The world feared the violence would escalate into all-out war. Iran's gamble risked provoking an even stronger response. The region braced for further retaliation. The question now, how far would this conflict go? The U.S. responded with a show of strength. President Trump warned Iran of unprecedented retaliation if it escalated further. The threat was intentionally vague, leaving Iran guessing about the next move. The U.S. deployed more troops and military assets to the region, signaling readiness for conflict. American officials framed their actions as necessary defense, casting Iran as the aggressor. Allies were reassured, while adversaries were put on notice. The world watched as military tensions soared. The U.S. aimed to deter Iran while rallying international support. the risk of miscalculation was high, with both sides on alert. The situation teetered on the edge of a wider war. Washington's hard line raised fears of uncontrollable escalation. The next move could determine the fate of the region. The crisis gripped the world's attention. Global leaders called for restraint, fearing a catastrophic war. The UN and European powers urged diplomacy, but divisions ran deep. Russia and China condemned the U.S., highlighting global rivalries. The Middle East's instability threatened the world economy. Oil prices surged, markets fell. The crisis exposed how interconnected the world is. Every escalation risked global consequences. Diplomacy seemed distant, but the stakes were clear. The world anxiously awaited the next development. The crisis sparked unrest across the Middle East. In Iraq, protests erupted, some supporting Iran, others fearing war. Iraq's government was caught between powerful neighbors and internal divisions. Gulf states targeted by missiles urged caution but feared devastation. Their economies and cities were now vulnerable. Israeli forces went on high alert, bracing for further attacks. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict grew even more volatile. Ordinary people across the region lived in fear, uncertain of what would come next. The path to peace looked narrow and fraught with danger. The entire region teetered on the brink of a major war. The world holds its breath, uncertain of what comes next. Further escalation could trigger a devastating regional war. A cycle of attacks and counterattacks would draw in more countries and cause immense suffering. Another possibility, a tense, unstable standoff, with proxy attacks and cyber warfare. This shadow war would keep the region on edge, risking sudden escalation. The best hope is diplomacy. If leaders can step back and talk, mediation by a third party could offer a way out, but trust is low. The costs of war may eventually force both sides to seek peace. This crisis shows how fragile peace is and how quickly conflict can spread. The death of Iran's supreme leader has reshaped the Middle East. The choices made now will determine the region's and the world's future. The stakes have never been higher.